It all began when I stumbled upon a listing on Craigslist that piqued my curiosity. The ad promised a vintage typewriter, a relic from a bygone era, at a price that seemed too good to be true. As a collector of oddities and antiques, I couldn't resist the allure of adding such a piece to my collection. I reached out to the seller, a mysterious figure named Mr. Blackwood, and we quickly struck a deal. He instructed me to meet him at an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Now, I've always had a penchant for the eerie and unusual, so the prospect of exploring a dilapidated warehouse in the dead of night didn't deter me in the slightest. As I arrived at the designated location, rain poured down in torrents, and the warehouse loomed before me like a forgotten relic of another era. The flickering streetlights cast eerie shadows on the building's crumbling facade, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of dampness and decay, and the only sound was the rhythmic drip of water from the leaky roof. I called out, announcing my presence, and a voice echoed back, "Mr. Blackwood." He emerged from the shadows, a tall and gaunt figure with piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my very soul. He led me deeper into the warehouse, the faint glow of a single lantern guiding our way. The space was filled with forgotten relics, broken furniture, dusty paintings, and an air of desolation that clung to everything like a shroud. We finally arrived at a dimly lit corner, where an antique typewriter sat atop a weathered wooden table. It was a thing of beauty, a true work of art, and I couldn't believe my luck. Mr. Blackwood watched as I examined the typewriter, his gaze never leaving me, and a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. I handed him the agreed-upon payment, and he placed the money in his coat pocket with a slow, deliberate movement. As I reached out to pick up the typewriter, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the lantern, plunging us into darkness. Panic gripped my heart as I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to guide me. When I turned back to the table, Mr. Blackwood was gone, vanished into thin air. My heart raced as I stumbled toward the exit, the sound of my own footsteps echoing through the empty warehouse. And then, just as I reached the doorway, I heard it, a faint whisper that seemed to come from all around me, a voice that was both chilling and alluring. "Welcome to my domain," the voice hissed, sending a shiver down my spine. I fled from the warehouse, my footsteps echoing through the rain-soaked streets as I left behind the haunting presence of Mr. Blackwood and his enigmatic typewriter. Little did I know that this encounter was just the beginning of a nightmare that would follow me like a shadow, a sinister force that would defy explanation and reason. In the days that followed my eerie meeting with Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and every creak and whisper seemed to take on a sinister meaning. I tried to dismiss my unease as mere paranoia, but deep down, I knew something was amiss. Late one night, as I lay in bed, a soft tapping sound roused me from my slumber. At first, I brushed it off as the product of my overactive imagination, but the persistent rhythm continued, growing louder and more insistent. With trepidation, I rose from my bed and followed the sound, which led me to the window. Peering outside, I gasped in horror. There, on the rain-soaked pavement below, stood Mr. Blackwood. His eyes bored into mine, filled with a malevolence that sent a chill down my spine. His lips curled into a sinister smile, and in his hand, he held the very typewriter I had purchased from him. It was as though he had stepped out of the shadows of the warehouse and into the depths of my nightmares. I slammed the window shut, my heart pounding in my chest. But the nightmare didn't end there. In the days that followed, I would catch fleeting glimpses of Mr. Blackwood on the street, in crowded cafes, and even outside my workplace. He seemed to materialize out of thin air, a specter haunting my every move. Soon, I began receiving cryptic letters in the mail, letters filled with ominous warnings and veiled threats. They spoke of ancient rituals and unspeakable secrets, of a darkness that could not be escaped. I felt like a pawn in a twisted game, with Mr. Blackwood pulling the strings from the shadows. Desperation and fear consumed me. I sought solace in the company of friends, hoping their presence would offer some reprieve from the relentless stalking. But Mr. Blackwood's influence seemed to seep into every facet of my life. My friends began to notice the change in me, the constant paranoia and anxiety that had taken hold. One evening, as I returned home from work, I found my apartment door ajar. Heart pounding, I cautiously entered, only to be met with a chilling sight: the typewriter, the catalyst for this nightmare, perched on my dining table. My blood ran cold as I realized that Mr. Blackwood had crossed a line, infiltrating the one place that should have been safe. But my fear soon turned to anger. I was no longer willing to be a pawn in Mr. Blackwood's twisted game. With newfound determination, I vowed to confront him, to put an end to this reign of terror once and for all. Gathering my courage, I ventured back to the abandoned warehouse, the place where it all began. The rain poured down, casting an eerie pallor over the desolate landscape. As I stepped inside, the air grew heavy with anticipation, and the faint glow of a lantern beckoned me deeper into the shadows. And there, standing before me, was Mr. Blackwood. His eyes gleamed with a sinister intensity, and a wicked smile played upon his lips. But this time, I was prepared. I held in my hand a letter that exposed his secrets, that revealed his true nature to the world. With unwavering resolve, I confronted Mr. Blackwood, my voice unwavering as I read aloud the damning words from the letter. His facade of power crumbled, and his menacing demeanor faltered. The darkness that had shrouded him began to dissipate, replaced by an aura of vulnerability. In that moment, I realized that Mr. Blackwood was not the invincible force I had imagined him to be. He was merely a man, consumed by his own twisted obsessions. And with that realization, the power he held over me began to wane. As the final words of the letter echoed through the warehouse, Mr. Blackwood let out a guttural cry, a cry that seemed to emanate from the depths of his very soul. And then, with a burst of smoke and a flash of light, he vanished, a specter banished by the truth. I emerged from the warehouse, drenched by the rain but filled with a newfound sense of liberation. The nightmare was over, the darkness lifted, and though the memory of Mr. Blackwood's haunting presence would linger, I was finally free from his grasp. It all began when I stumbled upon a listing on Craigslist. I had recently moved to a new city and was looking for some cheap furniture to furnish my apartment. The listing was for a vintage mirror, ornate and elegant, the perfect addition to my new home. The price seemed too good to be true, but I brushed off any skepticism and decided to give it a shot. I contacted the seller, a person named Victor, and we agreed to meet at a local park to complete the transaction. The park was fairly busy that day, with people walking their dogs, playing frisbee, and enjoying the sunshine. I spotted Victor near a bench, holding the mirror. It was even more exquisite up close, and I was thrilled with my find. Victor, however, gave me an odd vibe. He had a nervous energy about him, and his smile seemed forced. I attributed it to social awkwardness and thanked him for the mirror. As I turned to leave, he called out, "Wait! There's something I should tell you." I turned back, curious. Victor hesitated for a moment, then said, "That mirror is special. It's said to have belonged to a famous actress from the 1920s. But it's more than just a piece of history. They say it has a power, a way of showing you things you can't see with your own eyes." I chuckled, thinking he was just trying to add some mystique to the sale. But his gaze was intense, almost pleading. I mumbled my thanks again and quickly left, the mirror tucked under my arm. Back in my apartment, I placed the mirror in the living room, where it caught the light and seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. I laughed at the thought of Victor's words, dismissing them as mere fantasy. Yet, that night, as I glanced at my reflection, I could have sworn I saw a faint figure standing behind me, a woman in a vintage gown, her expression hauntingly sorrowful. I blinked, and she was gone. In the following days, my unease grew. I found myself stealing glances at the mirror, half expecting to see the mysterious woman again. Each time, my heart raced, but the mirror merely reflected my own image. I chalked it up to fatigue and stress from the move, trying to ignore the unease gnawing at the back of my mind. One evening, I invited a friend over for dinner. As we chatted in the living room, she suddenly went silent, her eyes fixed on the mirror. I asked her what was wrong, and she pointed at the glass. "Who's that behind you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I turned to look, my heart pounding. There was nothing, just my own reflection. I laughed nervously, dismissing her question. But my friend insisted, describing a woman in a vintage gown, her eyes filled with sadness. I froze. It was the same figure I thought I had glimpsed before. Over the next few weeks, the mirror became an obsession. I found myself staring into it for hours, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious woman. And sometimes, I did. She would appear fleetingly, always in the background, her presence hauntingly real yet intangible. My friend grew increasingly concerned, urging me to get rid of the mirror. But I couldn't let go. It was as if the mirror held a secret, a connection to something beyond our world. Late one night, unable to sleep, I approached the mirror again. This time, the woman didn't vanish. She reached out, her fingers pressing against the glass, her eyes filled with an imploring desperation. I gasped and stumbled back, my heart racing. The mirror had become a portal, a window into another realm. The woman was trapped, her spirit tethered to the glass. I knew I had to help her, to free her from the mirror's grasp. But how? The answer came to me in a dream, a vivid vision of a hidden compartment in the mirror's ornate frame. With trembling hands, I pried open the frame, revealing a small compartment containing a delicate necklace. I recognized it as the missing piece, the key to setting the woman free. The moment I placed the necklace around my own neck, the woman's image flickered and faded. A sense of peace washed over me, and I knew she was finally at rest. The mirror's power was broken, its hold on her spirit released. From that day on, the mirror was just a mirror once again. My friend's concern turned to relief as my obsession waned, and I could finally move forward without the weight of the supernatural hanging over me. I sold the mirror, passing it on to another unsuspecting buyer, never revealing its true history. And so, my Craigslist find turned from a curiosity to a chilling adventure, reminding me that even the most ordinary of objects can hold extraordinary secrets.